Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Cloud Defensive Rein. The weapon light arm race continues, and the latest offering from Cloud Defensive is something that's been in development for over a year. In fact, I think it's closer to 2 years, which is the Rein. It comes in a micro and a full size or longer body for more runtime, which we'll get into the specific stats. Now this is a full package system. Whether you buy the micro or the Rein, you're getting the light, you're getting the actual tail cap switching system, and then it comes with a pressure pad which is momentary and constant, which is a very cool design, and it takes up very little real estate, which is something we seem to be gravitating towards when it comes to controls, especially for rifles and lights in specific, but lasers as well. We're getting rid of a lot of the extra real estate that we didn't necessarily need for hand placement, which frees up rail space for other accessories. Now, Cloud Defense sent out both lights to me to put through my evaluation process, the full size and the micro. I decided to do the 2,000 round review process on the micro itself. However, I will talk about the traditional Rein, the full size, if you will, during the review. For stats, with the Rein, you're getting 60,000 candela at 1,400 lumens, which is significant. That's a lot of really good light output, and it's a warmer temperature, right around 40K. Unlike some of the other lights that push 50, 52 and up with their actual light temp, which is a very brilliant bright light, which is something we've all become accustomed to. However, that light, while advantageous for extreme distances in certain situations, if the candela's there anyway, isn't necessarily the best temperature you want to use in more urban environments or environments that have a lot of particulates or a lot of what we call photonic barriers, which is basically a fancy way to say that there's other urban or ambient lighting sources present that may keep you from being able to see your target. The Rein Micro, which is what I'm mostly focusing on in this video, it's what I'm actually doing the 2,000 round review process in, it comes in at 55,000 candela with 1,300 lumens, and that's basically a reduction due to the body and the battery size. It's using an 18350 versus an 18650 battery source. So your runtime is a little bit reduced, but it is a weapon-specific light. You're going to get a runtime of 35 minutes. That's peak. I was actually able during the review process to sneak out a little bit more than 35 minutes, but I would have reduced output. Battery change is going to be pretty straightforward. Some of the cool features about the body itself, in fact, one of the coolest features about the body, both the Rein and the micro, is it has what they call a battery jack, which means regardless of what type of battery I'm using, be it flat or nipple top, I can adjust how much that battery tension is available inside the tube itself by kind of putting a flat head in there, wide screwdriver or something like that, and tightening down basically a retention device that snugs the battery into the weapon light. This is something that's very advantageous for, like I said, different battery styles that you're going to put in there, but also making sure the battery doesn't have any play in it to lose its connection during recoil, especially if you're mounting it on a more concussive gun. During the review process, I used it on 3 different rifles. Specifically talking about the micro, I used it on a Bren 2 in 7.62x39, a Scar 17 SBR 13-inch, very abusive with a break on it, and then my ADM 12.5 machine gun, which is what I primarily used it on, but I wanted to put it on some other rifles during the review process to see how it handled that muzzle blast. When I'm looking at a weapon light for review process, I'm looking at output, obviously, but I also want to make sure that the durability is there. Of course, we're going to get to a drop test as well. But first, let's talk about the cool features. Like I already alluded to, the switching is great. Mounting the light, you can use Surefire specific or kind of like the quote-unquote industry standard for mounting systems. I used Arasaka mounts, a couple different mounts depending on which rifle I was putting it on at the time. The cable system can be tuned based on output from the light body itself. You've got 4 positions, so you can kind of wind that cable in or let it out a little bit based on mounting position, height, and switch positioning. The switch itself has an early out as well as a full channel, so you can run that cable out the back, out the front, or out the side. And you've got momentary and constant on, and there's a tactile difference between the 2 buttons, so if you're on the gun in a moment, you can kind of tell the difference between the 2 switches. I love switches that have constant on because I'm a firm believer in turn the light on, do work, and then turn the light off when you're done versus having to maintain a type of pressure that you're not necessarily used to during your traditional shooting. But that's getting into more of the technique side of things. And you pair those systems together with a good mounting system, you get a very small footprint and a total package, so you don't have to outsource or seek out other lighting systems. Previous generations of lights have relied on the big dogs, such as Surefire, using the Surefire system, but those wires were not able to maximize the output of the next generation lights. So Cloud decided to just make their own switch so to get maximum output out of the lighting system. During my normal practice when I shoot in low light, something I do quite frequently is I set up realistic lighting conditions. Any light is going to be awesome on a range that's unrealistic. A lot of ranges don't have ambient lighting, you got to bring it yourself, or they have lighting that is more administrative in purposes. They don't have downrange lighting where you can set up backlighting or side lighting or overhead lighting like you'd find in the real world. And that's always been kind of a complaint with mine, so I have portable light stands that I'm able to set up. I use vehicle headlights and whatever else I can get my hands on and change the lighting conditions to see how whatever the light is, or if I'm just doing practice, how I'm able to navigate those what we call photonic barriers. Because of the output on the Rein, I am able to get a little better definition when pushing through ambient lighting. Of course, my ambient lighting that I set up, my light stands, I can change the temperature on them as well. So I can run super warm or I can run super cool, so I get varied lighting conditions because there's a lot of different light sources out there. Most common light barrier you're going to encounter in an urban environment is either low or high sodium, which is that yellowish light, which can be problematic for certain lights based on candela and temperature to push through. And of course, this is getting very technical, but this is a very technical subject. So I think a lot of thought went into choosing a good temperature output on the Rein so it maximizes its performance against these photonic barriers. And what I found is setting it up for extreme long range, or quote-unquote CQB distances. That light source lends itself well to pushing through these various barriers, whether it be side lighting, overhead lighting, backlighting, or intermediate lighting. Think about a light source and then your target is behind that. So car headlights or storefront windows or any kind of light source you can think of that you'd encounter out there in the world, street light, whatever, your target can be beyond that. You've got to have a light that's got the horsepower, if you will, to push through that, and the Rein definitely does that. Of course, the next thing is, can the Rein handle hard use? And this is a question that some people get, and because I've kind of pigeonholed myself into keeping my testing consistency, such as the drop test, I mounted it on a few different guns, and I didn't have any issues with it handling the muzzle blast from brakes on very short 308s or 7.62x39, mounted on the Bren or the Scar. I didn't have any connectivity issues, any light issues, it just ran. Of course, the very first thing I did once I got it mounted up was the Burndown. Now, Burndown, if you're not familiar, is 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if that accelerated rate of fire identifies any issues that I wouldn't otherwise see shooting the same amount of ammo over a much longer, more lazy period of time. What I'm looking for in this test, specifically with the Rein, is to see if the muzzle blast causes any issues with the bezel or the lens or the body, and if the switch system can handle the heat generated from that accelerated rate of fire. So here's your Burndown. If a light can handle being mounted on an SBR machine gun, it can probably handle any muzzle blast you're going to throw at it, quote unquote, no pun intended. But again, mounted on the Scar, and the muzzle blast from the Scar is very, very atrocious. If you've never fired an SBR 308, it's an experience. In fact, I've had students in classes who've run SBR 308s, vehicle classes specifically. I remember a couple situations where a student was actually muzzle down range right next to one of the vehicles we're using in the class, and the muzzle blast actually broke one of the side windows, and that's happened on more than one occasion. Granted, these aren't top of the line vehicles because they're being used in a vehicle class shot up, and they probably cost me $300–400, but it just goes to show you that that concussive muzzle blast is there, and it's a little bit more prevalent on these shorter, larger caliber guns. If a weapon light can handle that, it's probably going to be able to be mounted on anything that you're likely to put it on. Of course, we also have to look at durability from incidental contact with the environment. I do that with a drop test. Now, this isn't necessarily to simulate you actually dropping your rifle, although that's very possible. I've seen it happen plenty of times before. Sling QD comes unhooked, or the rifle gets banged around, or it's leaned against a vehicle and falls over, what have you. I'm going to do it so you don't have to. I'm going to drop it from shoulder height, and I'm going to do it once every 500 rounds, which is exactly what I did with the Rein Micro. So here's your drop tests. So after over 2,000 rounds and 4 shoulder height drop tests, I'm good to go, and thank God it didn't break my rifle. So how do I feel about the Rein? I think it's awesome. I think that the fact that we have a full size and we have micro options, and one of the complaints we had with the Owl, even though some people just kind of misunderstood the intent of that light, was they couldn't run it with other accessories such as lamps. Couldn't run it under PEC 15 or with the Maul or anything like that, and that's not something I have to worry about with the Rein, because it has a more generous profile for the mounting in conjunction with other accessories. Now, the amount of shooters who are going to run a weapon light with a PEC 15 or a Maul or a Raid or something like that is a smaller demographic, but this light addresses that, and it also gives you back some of your real estate. Even though it really doesn't, if you think about it, it's actually taking up a little less space than the Owl does, but some people like to be able to move their pressure pad where they would like, and on longer guns, the Owl could be problematic. If you're mounting it all the way to the end of the rail on an 18-inch gun, you got to have a little bit of a reach there. Now, if I don't have an SBR, which a lot of people don't, I have the ability to run my switch a little further back for more comfortability for accessibility, things of that nature. Performance was fantastic, battery life was great, and of course the durability was there. The quoted stats are what they are. The light's going to give you the performance that they're telling you it's going to give you, and it's going to give it to you at a temperature that isn't really accessible from some of the other lights that are out there. And this comes into personal preference, but also environment. If I'm going to work in a more urban environment, I probably am going to go with a 40K light if I can get one. If I have to work in more of a rural environment, I kind of want to push more bright white light, but it is kind of a preference issue. Even though some things aren't preference, this is definitely one of those situations. Are you going to lose the ability for PID because you go with a warmer light temp? No, absolutely not. You're still pushing the same amount of candela and lumens if you compare two lights with two different light temps. But having this available, nobody else is really doing it the way the Cloud Defense is doing it. So you're really getting a total package. If you want to mount it to Picatinny 1913, it comes with a mount in the box. It also comes with a charger, batteries, everything you're going to need. Now, if you need to run it on M-Lock or Keymod, you're going to have to buy an aftermarket mount for that. But other than that, it comes with everything you need. You don't have to source anything else. So the cost, when you factor in what you're getting in the box, is actually very reasonable, especially considering the output and the performance. And this thing is user serviceable. So if your lens does happen to break and like force on force, or you actually just drop it just right and you got really good lens contact, that's something that can be corrected very easily just by, getting a lens and replacing it. And of course, it's forward thinking, just like the Owl is, where if they come out with the next generation of head, you're going to be able to purchase that and change out your head, no big deal. And of course, my favorite feature, which is kind of silly, but it's not, is the battery jack. No other light has ever offered that, to my knowledge, in that way. So I'm able to adjust the tension on how snug the battery fits inside the body, which is pretty amazing, because I've had lights in the past that had connectivity issues over time because that battery was allowed to move just a little bit. And over time, that back and forth motion during recoil or general transport caused connectivity issues, which is not something I want in a light that's going to go on a firearm because of the implication. I'm Eric Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.